Mark LeBlanc's Tools for Creating Dramatic Game Dynamics and Henry Jenkins's Game Design as Narrative Architecture. How a particular configuration of space in the game facilitates a specific set of game dynamics. Mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Three crucial aspects which Mark LeBlanc states are crucial in shaping every existing game. Meanwhile, Henry Jenkins believes that if some games tell stories, they are unlikely to tell them in the same ways that other media tell stories. Both theories agree that game designers need to think beyond strict either ludological or narrational boundaries, as the rules imposed on the original worlds bind both studies. The question remains, how do game designers deftly intertwine them so that it immerses successfully the players themselves? Games for years were meant to entertain rather than tell a story. Nevertheless, both authors have found that such become dull in the eyes of the players relatively abruptly. LeBlanc argues that the dramatic arc tends to keep the audience for longer, as there is a conflict, climax, and resolution, which may be measured by time and dramatic tension and manipulated quite swiftly by skillful narrators. Additionally, the uncertainty and inevitability of upcoming events need to be combined astutely, so that neither plays off one another. Jenkins complements the picture with a set of more detailed sets of devices to give better notion of how it could work in conjunction with an actual game. I decided to introduce Life is Strange, an action-adventure production created by Dontnod Entertainment. Upon its release, a relatively low-key production which gained quite a recognition, as it successfully used a set of aesthetic devices, at first introduced in 2012 with The Walking Dead the game. While the narrative aspect was praised most heavily, I believe that a certain configuration of spaces benefited substantially the aforementioned. The developers picked up on a few innovative approaches as well, which could be described as an extension of what LeBlanc and Jenkins once have written upon. First of all, the game features a particularly peculiar tool, time manipulation. While a number of productions already hosted such additions, mostly they are focused on what could be considered as LeBlanc's positive feedback system, where the player could slow down the time in order to gain advantage over the enemies, usually by supporting the aim. Dontnod took a more ambitious approach, as the player may reverse the time subsequently, legalizing the possibility of taking different choices. The player may even trigger the so-called butterfly effect, an act of changing an element in the past, radically altering the contemporary and future course of events. The question which should be formulated is how the developers could construct a successful game which clashes with LeBlanc's classical theory, including fiddling with the mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics, as even the dramatic arc as the narrative time angle of the child becomes disrupted. The answer may be found in Jesper Juul's Introduction to Game Time. Juul displays that the experience of time while playing games usually gets disrupted, as 2 minutes spent on SimCity might be worth a year within the production's time. Additionally, classic narrative devices such as foreshadowing, flashbacks, and retrospections were used quite effectively as the means for supporting the storyline's validity, immersing the audience even further at the expense of actual time. Nevertheless, there are other ways that were introduced by Henry Jenkins, which provides a more cultural and static matrix as a basis on one's experiences and perception. For instance, Life is Strange is lauded with references to movies and TV series. The placement, characters, events, and environment gives a vivid idea of David Lynch's classic Twin Peaks. The leading characters are merely a peculiar reflection of bluest warmest color. More subtle references may include a local drug dealer living in a recreational vehicle, strongly resembling Breaking Bad, or acronyms of film classics placed on car plates. Each interconnects the audience with productions they may already know, raising attention and appraisal as they recollect great memories one might have had. The affirmation may be considered as Jenkins's evocative spaces. It does not plagiarize, but merely adapts features taken from different cultural forms. The game's mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics share similarities with Telltale's The Walking Dead the game. The main menu structure is exactly the same. The world space is quite secluded, refraining the player from conducting any advanced exploration, and the aesthetics follow an elaborate narration construct, triggering heavy emotional responses and strongly binding the audience with the featured characters. Despite its equivocal description, the adapted combination was found to be working impeccably. Games enabled to enact stories, for instance, may prolong the push of the storyline forward. In Life is Strange, it may usually happen by performing specific actions such as speaking to other characters. Providing the freedom to apply individual dynamics to the storyline may derail the natural story's flow, unless the player becomes in charge of certain decisions, especially if they are ambiguous. Furthermore, Life is Strange enables the player to reverse one's decision. If we check each possible and non-supplied seem better over one another, we may begin to have more dilemmas. We become the character, start feeling as the character, and release emotional responses, despite that the storyline is already pre-programmed. By congruently designed, elusive choices actually do work extremely efficiently, as Spec Ops The Line or The Walking Dead the game have proven to. The spatial stories and environmental storytelling might be the most universal device though. Game designers are first to craft compelling spaces, raising a suitable atmosphere and complementing the storyline with additional micro-narratives, so that the player connects with the featured characters on a higher level. For instance, investigating highlighted objects will trigger an according response from the neighboring characters. Another Jenkins's device, named Enacting Stories, which tries with Lanx's dynamics. Each element correlates with each other, forming up into suitable aesthetics, which all in all are individual pleasures. Users' preferences prove that universal aesthetics values are difficult in defining, although dense with information spaces, abundantly filled with varying, but additionally relating objects will tend to be positively received by the audience. Nevertheless, aesthetics is not the sole part that builds the flow and connection between the player and the narrative. In-game textures in Life is Strange were hand-painted, which proved to be a quite controversial decision as the visuals were found underwhelming. Notwithstanding, Don't Nod introduced an original technique which, through mechanical means, influenced directly the aesthetics. Despite being ambivalent, the players rather focus on the environmental design and narrative. That proves that the visuals do not define whether aesthetics are poor or not. For instance, last year's Undertale was merely created in low-fidelity GameMaker. The game made up for with a memorable narrative and unique styling, which could be said about Life is Strange as well. Regardless, Jenkins and LeBlanc argued that designing a video game requires stepping outside typical ludological and narrative boundaries and focusing on applying original devices, which could be possibly only done with the parameters of an electronic interactive game. The world crafted needs to be built closely in conjunction with the storyline and play, so that it supports each other, keeping the player interested and entertained at once for the entire duration of play. The authors provide theoretical framework, which could be used as guidelines for game designers in order to make their productions even more compelling, as crucial complementation of designing story and play. This is the end of the video essay. I hope you enjoyed it, and please adhere to the references included in the PDF file. Thanks for watching.